of the Invictus Formula 2 Equal Performance League. Today it's just myself, Daniele, in the commentary box, and we are today in China, as you can see, for the Chinese Grand Prix here in Shanghai at the Shanghai International Circuit. As things stand, we are in a dry session for this qualifying session, and it will be dry for the race as well. So today we have only 9 participants. We're going to see them very shortly. If you missed last week's race, I recommend you go check it out because it was a very interesting race. It was a race full of battles and full of overtakes, and it saw Doran take the win. It was Doran who took the win and who managed to get the full 12 points. In fact, the Sauber driver managed to win from pole position in what was a very wet qualifying session, and it was actually a very straightforward race for him. He led from start to finish apart from the pit stop phase, and it was really easy for him. However, he was very closely followed by Jamie, who today is absent. He was racing in his Renault and he finished P2, just ahead of Humblestone. He also is absent tonight. With his Williams, he managed to finish in P number 3. Doran now starting his lap. He's leading the championship. He's in P1 in the driver's standings with 34 points. He is just 2 points clear of his main rival, who is Meg today, of course. He's in his McLaren, now bolting towards down the back straight and towards the hairpin. He is at the moment in his fast lap. Right now the provisional pole position is for Tony with a 1:33.3, probably going to dip under the 33s. We are looking for a high 32 for a pole position time. Right now Meg goes quickest with a 1:33.306, with Tony just behind, and Hulkenberger in P number 3, just 2 tenths away from provisional pole position. We were looking at Doran, who is now starting the third sector. Of course, this very long back straight, one of the longest straights in the entire calendar. The Sauber driver will be hoping to be very close to his rival Meg, if not ahead. Of course, Meg was the former driver who he was the former leader of the driver's standings. Of course, he had a 4 points advantage on Doran. Unfortunately, though, a poor showing in Great Britain at Silverstone gave to Doran the chance to go P1, as he not only did in the driver's standings last week, but he also did right now with 1:32.826. The Sauber driver is now in P1, half a second clear of everybody else. It really looks like Doran is the fastest guy out there. He's constantly in the first positions, and yeah, today as well he's very quick. As I said before, 5 tenths quicker than anybody else here in China. That was for the driver's standings. As for the constructor's standings, it's at the moment Renault in front with 47 points and 11 points clear of Sauber and McLaren, who are joint second place at 36. Of course, Renault with Jamie and Hulkenberger, who today is the only driver for Renault. Now, right now he sits in the pits when we are starting the second phase of the qualifying session, or well, the second part of the 12-minute qualifying session. And right now, Hulkenberger is in P5 with a 1:33.545. Meg has improved. The McLaren driver has improved to a 1:32.926, exactly a tenth slower than Doran. The two of them are just looking like on another level right now, 5/10 faster than everybody else, with Nick just ahead of Tony, and then Hulkenberger just ahead of SJD. And after him there is Jos in 7th place, then KW Tactics in 8th, and Craig without a time in P number 9. Of course, after a great showing last time out in Great Britain, Renault are now leading the Constructors' Championship with 47 points. Renault now only Hulkenberger tonight, so they will probably be on a damage limitation mission because, of course, both Sauber drivers are present today. Of course, our provisional poleman, Doran in P number 1, and then SJW in P number 6, who is currently in the pits. Everybody's in the pits right now, apart from Hulkenberger and Tony, who are on their outlap. And right now I saw also a Force India starting their lap. It was Jos, in fact, number 39, now going out on super soft tires. And yeah, while talking about tires, of course, everybody right now is on super soft tires, and the strategy for the race will probably be between a one stop on super soft tires first and the medium tires afterwards, or even a two stop, whether people wear their tires more or not. It depends. Of course, two stoppers probably look towards a set of softs separating a double super soft stint at the start and at the finish. Of course, running the fastest tire at the start and at the end of the Grand Prix usually brings a couple of benefits compared to using the fastest tires first and then finishing the race on worn and old soft tires. Right now we have a little bit more than 3 minutes remaining, and we have Endurance still in P1. Of course, everybody's now about to start their lap. Of course, now Tony, he is in his fastest lap, as well as Hulkenberger, who now finds ahead of him some traffic, so it's going to be very tricky for the Renault driver. I think that one is Doran just ahead of him. He will probably need to clear the way, and let's see if he does. Maybe after the complex of turn 4 and turn 5, it's not that easy for him to do so, but he eventually does, and Hulkenberger is able to continue his fast lap. And now we're monitoring both him and Tony, who will be the first one to set his a time on his second run. So let's see what the Haas driver, number 35, who sits 7th in the standings, joined with his teammate Craig. Let's see what he can do after not a not so good race in Great Britain, when he scored no points compared to the 4 points of Craig. Now coming towards the penultimate corner, of course a very tight hairpin for the Haas driver, who is now coming towards the final corner. 5th gear for him, interesting. Some drivers decide to go for the 4th gear there, and Tony, though, proves that 5th gear maybe is the way to go. The Haas driver climbs to the top of the table with a 132.693 and goes wide for good measure into turn 1. Hulkenberger, on the other hand, he's now, he has finished his lap and he has improved by a 10th. So he's just 7 tenths, he is 7 tenths behind Tony, and now sits in P number 5, just behind Nick L.J. Thompson, who is just ahead of him in 4th place. For him, a fastest lap of 1 minute 33 seconds and 338 thousandths. He's just less than 3 tenths shy of Meg in 3rd place. And yeah, we'll see now Hulkenberger improving himself in Sector 1. Ahead of him, Nick, he has started his last lap of the qualifying session. Of course, we have only 50 seconds remaining. Hulkenberger now down to P6 as Jos manages to improve, and he is now in P number 4. Great lap by the Force India, by the way. He manages a 1 minute 33.0. So at the moment, only the top 3 drivers are below the 133s and in the 132s, as the session is coming to a close. We'll see the final few laps, and Meg right now with his McLaren towards the final corner. Now Tony goes back into the pit lane, so he has finished his qualifying session. 132.6 is the time to beat. Let's see if Meg can do it. Now towards the race, towards the checkered flag, who is waved now. Meg doesn't improve, but maybe still has one lap as Hulkenberger retires, and M. Doran climbs the tables and clinches top spot with a 132.474. Jos goes into P3 with 132.9. Nick L.J. Thompson is now 5th with a 133 flat. So very close qualifying session from P3 to P5, and now everything is on Meg's hands. Let's see if he can improve. Of course, he's the only driver now who can improve his lap time. Let's see what he can do. Now coming towards the central part of the circuit, he's going to end sector 2 right now after turn 9 and turn 10. He looks to be very fast right now, the McLaren driver. Now towards turn 11, turn 12, and a very, very difficult turn 13. He has to manage the throttle very well, and he does so indeed. No oversteer after turn 13, and now just a long wait before the final few corners, turn 14 and 15, the hairpin. Now coming towards it with Meg. Very good braking for the number 46. Now the McLaren driver towards the final corner. Let's see if he can improve. It looks like a solid lap. Let's see if he can climb the standings. Yes, he can, but not enough to clinch pole position. It's just P2 for Meg Gluckby. So yeah, it's a good qualifying session for him, but his rival, Doran, is in P1 with a 132.473. He's just a tenth faster than Meg in P2, 132.592 for him. And Meg is exactly a tenth faster than Tony, who had provisional pole when the checkered flag was waved, but finds himself at the start of row 2 in P3 with 132.692. In fourth place, Jos, just ahead of Nick. Hulkenberger, SJW in P7, KW Tactics in P8, and Craig, without a time, is going to start from P9 with his Haas. So, we're ready for the race. Of course, we're ready and we're waiting for the drivers to select their strategies, select their tires. Of course, being only 9 drivers today, everybody has to start on the super soft tires, and they will need to stop very early, as tire wear here is very, very important and actually is pretty harsh. So yeah, it's going to be a very close race in my opinion. Probably Doran or Meg for the win. But you know, Tony has done a very good qualifying lap, and he could be a threat today, or tonight I should say. But yeah, we're very close to the start of the race. Now ready to go towards those 5 red lights and start the Chinese Grand Prix round 5 of the Invictus Formula 2 Equal Performance League. And here we go, 5 red lights for the Chinese Grand Prix. And it's going to be lights out and away we go. And it's a good start from the McLaren of Meg. Let's see if he can challenge Doran. No, he can't. It's a very good start by the Sauber driver as well. Great start by Jos in P3, overtaking Tony. And now going towards the second part of the snail section with Doran ahead of everybody. Now Tony tried something up the inside of Jos, trying to get P3 back. And it has worked. The Haas driver is now into P3. And behind there's contact between what looks like KW Tactics and Hulkenberger, and behind now it's Nick L.J. Thompson, who tries and overtakes Jos, who is now down to P number 5. The 4 senior was briefly in P3, but now has to sit back and watch things from behind. In P number 5, behind them Hulkenberger in 6th, Craig in 7th, SJW in 8th, and KW Tactics in 9th. Of course, Craig was the better starter with 2 positions gained, and Nick also overtook Jos at the start. Otherwise, it was a pretty plain start. Nice and easy. Nobody wanted to throw their race away at the start, as it should be. And Jos makes a very big mistake and rejoins. And well, we were talking about throwing away the race, and Jos, unfortunately, for a mistake of him, he has taken out SJW. The Sauber driver is out of the race, and Jos not only has a broken front wing, I imagine, because it was quite a nasty crash. Yes, he has his right hand end plate who is damaged, and he also has a 5-second stop-go penalty. Let's see if he's going into the pits right now. Yes, he is, and it will be very interesting to see the tires he's going to fit. Craig, of course, he didn't do qualifying, and so he starts on the soft tires. And talking about Craig, there was probably a contact between him and Hulkenberger, as they both lost a heap of time, and Hulkenberger finds himself now in P6 and Craig down in P number 7. That was a shame for the Haas driver. Of course, soft tires could have been a very, very different strategy for him, but everything right now seems a bit compromised. Oh, well, great gesture by Hulkenberger, by the way, who waits for Craig and lets him pass. So very good sportsmanship by Hulkenberger right there. As we go back to the top of the leaderboard, and we see that Doran has a 2 seconds gap on Meg, who is now coming up under pressure from Tony and Nick, who look to be very, very fast, and Meg actually doesn't look like he's going to be that much of a threat to Doran this race. Of course, now let's see whether Meg is going to come under attack from Tony. No, it doesn't look like. The Haas driver still stays behind. Let's see if the Haas driver can do something right now. We're about to start lap 3, and DRS will be enabled as Doran clocks in the fastest lap of the race with a 1:36.646. A lot of sixes in there. As now the drivers go towards turn 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. The first complex of corners, of course, known as the snail section here in China, and pretty much resembles and remembers. It actually looks like the start of the Malaysian Grand Prix, if you remember. Of course, though, here there is a big elevation change. It's the first part of the corners are the first couple of corners are uphill, whereas the second part of the snail section is downhill, as Tony goes dangerously wide into turn 7. That's a pretty difficult turn 7, pretty difficult corner, as dirty air can really mess up with the car's aerodynamics, and so it will be very tough for Tony to follow Meg closely and not lose too much time. And now let's see, because he is 8 tenths behind, but with DRS, slipstream, and probably rich mix, it's going to be difficult to overtake Meg. Let's see if the Haas driver can. He's quite a long way behind though, so I don't think it's going to be that easy. And in fact, he's too far behind, even though he's very hot on the brakes, the Haas driver, and almost run into the back of Meg in P2. Now, actually, Meg and Doran lapping, well, they're doing not the exact same lap times, but they're pretty much as fast as one another, with Doran with a 2.2 seconds gap over Meg. Tony in P3, 9 tenths behind, and Nick in P4, 1.4 seconds behind Tony. We kind of saw Nick's potential in Great Britain when he was doing very well on his medium tires, but then a mistake after Maggots and Beckett's saw him pretty much out of contention for a spot on the podium and in the top 5 in general. In fact, Nick, who now, by the way, sits 5th in the standings, in the driver standings, had managed only P10 in Great Britain, so just a 1 point for him last week. Right now, he looks, well, if he finishes the race, he's gonna get more points because there's only 8 drivers remaining, and right now he sits in P4. Behind him, KW Tactics in P5 with his Red Bull pretty much alone right now, as he's 2.3 seconds behind and a big 11 seconds ahead of Craig. But let's focus on Tony and Meg. They're fighting for P2, and now the Haas driver looks to be pretty much looks to be a lot closer to Meg as the last lap, of course, much closer than the previous lap. Let's see if he can maybe make something happen towards turn 1. I think it's going to be very hard though for him. Tony right now in the slipstream of Meg as we start lap number 5 of the 28th here in the Chinese Grand Prix, round 5 of the Invictus Formula 2 Equal Performance League. He's too far behind to try something into turn 1. Maybe down towards turn 6 at the start of sector 2. We've seen a lot of overtakes there in real life. Of course, if you remember, 2017 Veteran Ricciardo, one of the best overtakes of the entire season. No, he's too far behind once again. Tony has to wait, but he looks to be quite fast, if I do say so. And Meg right now has lost 0.4 of a second in one lap to M. Doran. It's going to be very hard for Meg to keep up with Doran's pace, as well as defending from Tony. It's going to be a very hard task for him, but of course he's going to try and do so. Of course, starting from P2, a much better start to the race than last time out in Great Britain, where in a very wet qualifying session he had to start all the way down in P10 and then came back and finished P5 with kind of a damage limitation race. And now the Haas driver really looks very close to the McLaren driver of Meg. Let's see if he can make something happen towards turn 14. He moves, but he looks to be too far behind. Not that great of a straight line speed for Tony. Doesn't look to be a threat on the straights, even though the Chinese Grand Prix back straight is one of the longest in the entire calendar, as we said before. Now starting lap number 6 with M. Doran up ahead, 1.9 seconds ahead, so he's made a little bit of a mistake. Lost 0.5 of a second in this lap, and let's see if Tony can do something, because well, it doesn't look like he has the straight line speed to overtake Meg down towards turn 14, turn 1, or either turn 6 right now. But it looks to be very good, not only on the braking, but also in the corners. So maybe a bit of more of a high downforce setup for Tony. I don't know, probably because Meg is gaining on the straights and in acceleration as well. Let's see. Of course, the Haas driver, Tony, for him it's a very important race, as he is 7th in the driver's standings, tied with his teammate Craig, who is down in P6, and he is also only 2 points behind P5 in the driver's standings of Nick LJ Thompson, and just 1 point behind of P6, who is KW Tactics. So yeah, Tony is. It's a pretty important race for him and Haas. Of course, Haas is 4th in the Constructors' Championship with 28 points. They're a long way behind Renault, the leaders of the Constructors' Championship. Of course, they are 19 points behind. It's going to be very difficult for them to catch the Renault team, but of course they're only 8 points behind McLaren and Sauber, so Tony in P3 could bring some very important points, even though the 2 cars ahead of him, ironically, are McLaren and Sauber, with Meg in P2 and M. Doran in P1. Of course, he would have loved the help, or he would have loved some help from his teammate Craig, who right now is only P6. Well, we say only, of course, it's still a great place to finish in. Let's see if he can keep up, also because Craig has the soft tires, so probably he has a 2-stop in mind, because well, in this race drivers could go either for a 1-stop or a 2-stop, but for a 1-stop in order for a 1-stop to work, drivers would need the medium tires. So I don't know, maybe Craig is going for a soft medium strategy. I don't know how much that strategy is going to help him at all. I don't know, because super soft tires are quite fast at the start of the race, And talking about super soft tires, they're starting to come to the end of their life right now, I think. So probably we're going to see some pit stops in a couple of laps time, maybe even this lap. Let's see. Doran right now coming towards the final corner, turn 16, a 90-degree left-hander. Let's see if he can pull. If he pulls into the pits, no, he doesn't, and not really anybody pulls into the pits. So everybody continues. If I were Tony, probably I would probably go for an undercut, at least try. Of course, drivers know when they can and when they cannot go into the pit lane according to their strategies. Of course, if a driver knows that he's not going to make a medium tire set last 20 or so laps, they're probably going to pit around lap 9 or lap 10. Who knows? Of course, now Tony and Meg are in P3 and P2 respectively, and Tony actually looks like he's lost a couple of tenths. He's now 1.3 seconds behind, with Nick, for the first time in the race, the Mercedes driver, is below the 1 second gap. So if he keeps this up, he's probably going to use DRS on the back straight, down the back straight. But as I said that, he goes up to 1.2 seconds, and the chance for DRS is gone, as the DRS detection point is right here into turn 13. He is well behind, 1.3 seconds behind Tony, so no DRS for him and no DRS for Tony. And that means that Meg can actually breathe a little bit and maybe try and catch Doran. Right now 1.7 seconds the gap. Yeah, he could try and catch him. Of course, still a long way to go in this race. Probably the strategy will have a big roll, and that's a shame for Tony. As I said before, he could probably try an undercut, but he's pulled off at Hamilton. If you remember, in 2007. Well, he also gets 5 seconds of stop-go penalty. That's a shame for him. In the pits as well, Nick, who comes out with medium tires, and KW Tactics, who comes out with medium tires as well. That's a shame for Tony. Such a shame. Of course, not the pit stop you wanted, not the pit stop he wanted. He fits. Let's see, are they super soft tires or are they softs? They are super soft. So Tony's going for a 2-stop, definitely going for a 2-stop, whereas KW Tactics and Nick are going for a 1-stop on the medium tires. Of course, the 1-stop is just a little bit faster than the 2-stop. Let's see though, Hulkenberg in P8 now goes for a set of mediums as well. And now Doran really struggling with his tires. Wow, look at that drift. He's actually in 7th gear, coming down towards the main straight, talking about short shifting, and Meg is right behind him, just 6 tenths behind. The number 46 in the McLaren has gained a lot, and who knows, pit stops could play a huge role, because of course now Tony's out of contention for a podium spot, at least for now. They both enter the pits quite well, and let's see what Nick is up to, because Nick L.J. Thompson is in P number 4 and hunting down Craig in P3, and right now effectively in a podium place finish, as Craig will eventually pit. Meg goes for medium tires, and same for Doran. Let's see now, Nick is coming towards the final, well, he has done the final corner, and however, both Doran and Meg are out of the pits before Nick comes to the first corner. So Meg manages to keep his provisional P2. Of course, now P3, as Craig has a little time up front in P number 1 with his soft tires. It's going to be very interesting for him, because we've seen that super softs can last 9 laps. Of course, at the end of the race, they could last even longer, for example, 10 or 11 laps. So who knows, maybe Craig going for a soft and then a super soft strategy, but he's going to, well, he has to stretch this set of tires at least until lap number 17, which is going to be very hard, if I do say so myself. On soft tires, 17 laps aren't really achievable. Well, they are, but the tire degradation is going to be too much for Craig to gain something out of this strategy. Now Doran 4.2 seconds behind. It's going to be very interesting actually to follow the gap between Craig and Doran and see how much the leader of the race can gain on his fresh medium set of tires compared to the old and worn out soft tires of Craig. And now 4.1 is the gap behind them. Meg is just 0.8 of a second behind Doran. And it will be fantastic to watch these two battle, of course. Doran just 2 points ahead of Meg in the championship. The points gap between first place and second place are just 2 points, so it could be very interesting to watch these two battle. Tony, with his super soft tires, does the fastest lap of the race, 1:36.0 for him. That's a shame for Tony, really, after that mistake, coming into the pit lane, and now finds himself all the way down in P number 6, where he could have challenged both Meg and Doran had he not made that mistake, that crucial mistake, at the start of the pits, well, while entering the pit lane. And so now Doran is 3.3 seconds behind Craig, almost a full second gain in sector 1 and 2 alone. And yeah, of course, worn tires, especially I think into turn 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then of course in sector 2 with turn 7 and 8, you need a lot of grip, and of course worn tires can't provide you that. So yeah, Craig now has lost further 0.5. He now finds himself 2.8 seconds ahead of the provisional leader. Of course, remembering that today we have only 8 drivers. Well, we had 9, but unfortunately SJW, who is right now in the chat, you have to feel feel bad for him, honestly. The Sauber driver was pretty much taken out by Jos. Of course, Jos didn't mean to, but rejoining the track probably a bit too dangerously, and SJW had nowhere to go, so was a very unfortunate race for him, but I'm sure he's going to bounce back next week for the Singapore Grand Prix in Marina Bay. So what's the situation right now? Meg is 9 tenths behind Doran, but doesn't look like the McLaren driver can catch the Sauber driver to try and overtake him. Of course, they're essentially battling out for P1 in both the race and the driver standings. So if I were Meg, I would push a lot harder. Of course, maybe he's pushing as hard as he can, of course, and Doran just is as fast as him, if not a bit faster. But yeah, as JW says right now, he says, I saw him coming, should have backed out, but thought there was pace on the inside. Well, it's pretty much not impossible, but it's very difficult to judge your position and your opponent's position coming out of turn 13. Like, you're there at 200 plus kph, so was a very unfortunate incident, but his teammate Doran right now looking well in P1, looking good in P1, as Craig finally goes into the pit lane. 13 laps on his super softs, medium if he wants to go till the end, or a double stint of super softs. All I see are medium tires though, so I think he's going to go with them, and that is the case. So Craig now exiting the pit lane with Jos coming down the main straight. Let's see if Craig can exit the pit lane ahead of him. Yes, he can. So Craig is in an effective P6, maybe even P5, as Tony still has to pit. Of course, he did put on super soft tires once again after he ran the super soft tire as well in the first stint as well. Of course, the two Haas drivers battling for P4 in the standings, in the constructor standings, just 2 points ahead of the Red Bull, and today the only Red Bull driver is KAW Tactics, who is pretty much doing a race under the radar. He's not really filmed a lot today, sorry for him, but he's pretty much alone from the start of the Grand Prix, and he's 4 seconds behind P3 and 5.8 seconds ahead of P5, so pretty much in the land of nowhere, if that's how you say in English. So he is in P4. Ahead of him, Nick in P3 with his Mercedes. Would be nice for him to finish in that position and be back on the podium once again after Brazil, where he finished P2 just behind Meg in P1. But yeah, he looks to be now pretty much not fast enough to catch both Meg and Doran. And right now Meg starting to lose a little bit of time. I'm afraid he doesn't have the pace to catch Doran. 1.4 seconds the gap is. And yeah, Doran really looks set for the victory here. Of course, still half of the race to go, 14 laps. Let's hope they can battle a little bit and maybe they can provide some good racing, as we have seen all championship long by not only these two drivers but all the drivers that are taking part in this championship. For Meg, of course, you have, well, Meg has Meg, he has kind of a strange situation on his hands because he's in P2 in the standings, but he's just 2 points behind Doran. So he could catch Doran and try and overtake him, with the risk of both making a mistake and going off track, and so risking to spin out or maybe even a crash and go out of the race and lose position and points. Or he can just sit back and wait for a mistake by Doran, if a mistake will ever come. If it does, well, he's in P1. If it doesn't, Meg will finish in P2 probably, as I think he's faster than Nick and can stay ahead of him if Nick tries something, because as we've seen before, Nick isn't that fast in a straight line. So I don't know, Meg right now probably has more of a conservative approach, even though he's probably pushing like hell, as these drivers always are. And yeah, it's going to be quite tough for him to decide what to do. Behind, in P number 7, Jos comes into the pits. He's going to fit medium tires, I think. The Force India, of course, if you remember, had a massive spin out of turn 13 on lap 1, and so he had to pit on lap 1, put soft tires for a good 14 laps, and then 13 should I say, and then decided to go for the medium tires now at the end of his race. He now sits in last place, 12 seconds behind Hockenberger, another driver who had a collision, this time on lap 2 into turn 1, so he lost a heap of time as well, but a lot of his time loss was due to his great sportsmanship conduct, as he crashed with Craig and waited for him to go by and ahead of him. But yeah, Hockenberger doesn't really look to have the pace around here compared to, of course, Silverstone. If you remember, if you watched that race, Hockenberger finished in P4 and was his best result of the season. So a good driver, the Renault one, but probably needs a bit more consistency in his results, as he sits in P7 in this race and in P11 in the driver standings with 11 points, tied with Delange, who today is absent. So going back to the top of the leaderboard, Doran right now stretches the gap to 2.1 seconds. That's not really what both Meg and us spectators wanted, because that pretty much gives the chance to Doran to just try and go away from Meg and build a bit of gap, which could be very handy for him if a mistake, or if he makes a mistake, or just if he has a problem and he loses a couple of seconds, he would have this 2.3 seconds cushion on Meg, who is now in P2. And behind Meg, we have Nick, who is in P3, Nick L.J. Thompson, with his Mercedes. Of course, Mercedes they are far back in the constructor standings. Not something we would be used to say in real life, of course, as we know Mercedes a great team and has won all championship in the past 4 years, and they are trying to do so for the 5th year in a row. But here they are struggling a little bit. They have only 19 points, and they are 7th in the standings. And Nick, of those 19 points, 16 of them have come from Nick L.J. Thompson, who's doing a good job, and the other ones were from Mike, who then eventually retired from the championship, and so the Mercedes has been left with only one driver, of course, which is Nick. Now another driver goes into the pits, and it's Tony, who finished his stint on the super soft tires, and now goes in for his second stop. And interesting enough, he goes for a set of soft tires. Of course, he can. He has done 8 laps on the first stint of super softs and 8 laps on the second stint of super softs. So it just looks right to decide to go on the soft tires. Of course, every driver has to use 2 compounds and one between 2 different compounds, with one of them being either the soft tires or the medium tires here in China. So one of the 2 hardest compounds. And yeah, Tony decided for a tube stop strategy. Now he rejoins the track in P7 behind both Craig and Hulkenberger. It's going to take a while for him to catch his teammate Craig in P5. However, Hulkenberger is just ahead in 6th place with a 3.8 second gap. So yeah, that probably will be the closest fight right now, as well. Mega's gained quite a lot on Doran, 1.5 seconds. He was 2.3 in the last lap, so maybe a little mistake by the Sauber driver. But yeah, we'll see. I mean, Doran looks to be very fast today, so I don't know whether Meg will have the pace, the ultimate pace, to go not only catch Doran, but also overtake him. So, lap 18, things are pretty much settled right now. There aren't drivers who are close to one another in order to go and look up to their fight. And I'm actually looking forward right now for the last few laps, because as we've seen in the first stint, Doran isn't really that good at keeping his tires. He had lost a heap of time in the final lap of his super soft stint. He was like a couple of seconds ahead of Meg, and then after the pit stop, just before the pit stop, he was only 6 tenths ahead. So Meg probably the better driver tire wear wise. I don't know, but it's going to be quite difficult for Meg to catch Doran, but maybe in the last few laps, who knows. Right now he's keeping up with Doran's pace. Let's just have a look at their long run pace. Of course, Doran right now with his fastest lap of the race with a 1:36.5. He's really consistent, by the way, apart from lap number 17. So yeah. Okay, so we are back. Just 9 laps to go here in China. Meg trying to catch Doran right now. 1.6 is the gap. I don't know whether he's going to be able to overtake Doran. I really hope he's going to catch him, so because a fight for the win will be awesome, and just for me as well as for you guys watching this race at home. Of course, Doran and Meg fighting for the championship, and right now doesn't look like anybody else will be able to contest them to actually try and be a threat to them in both the driver's standings and today, as Nika has lost a lot of time. He's now 5.8 seconds behind Meg, and as well in the driver's standings, Jamie, who is absent today, is 10 points behind Doran. And as we know, the point system here isn't the same as the real life Formula 1, so the winner doesn't get 25 points, only gets 12. So yeah, it's going to be very hard for Jamie to catch the top two drivers. Tony clocks in the fastest lap of the race. He's now in P7, and now finally we have a fight, as he has catch the back of Hulkenberger in P number 6. So it's a fight for 6th place, and I think that after that Tony will be settled, because 15.8 seconds would be very difficult to gain in just 8 laps. Of course, his teammate Craig is in P5, which is a great recovery drive, by the way, after the lap 2 incident with Hulkenberger. So, and of course, Craig didn't take part in the qualifying session because of connection issues. So the Haas driver is doing a pretty good job. Now Tony really close to Hulkenberger. Let's see if he can maybe do something about it. Here into turn 11 he can't, but surely into turn 14, after the long back straight, he will probably be able to overtake Hulkenberger. Let's ride on board with him. DRS, slipstream, rich mix. Hulkenberger most to the inside. Tony tries round the outside. They both brake very late. There is a bit of contact, I think, and Hulkenberger tries to hang it down the inside, but Tony just looks to be the fastest driver traction-wise, thanks to his better shaped tires. And yeah, the Haas driver gets P6 down the inside on Hulkenberger, who's now probably trying. No, he's not trying anything into turn 1. Of course, that would have ruined both his and Tony's race. So he thinks better of it, and now actually has to defend a little bit and pick his pace up, because Jos is in P8 with much fresher medium tires and only 6.4 seconds behind, when we have 7 laps until the end of the Grand Prix, with Doran, the Sauber, leading the race, 2.1 seconds ahead of Meg Luckby in the McLaren number 46. Then in P3, 7.5 seconds off the leader is Nick L.J. Thompson with his Mercedes. In P4, KW Tactics with his Red Bull, the only Red Bull tonight. Then the two Haases of Craig and Tony, P5 and P6 respectively. Hulkenberger is in P7. He's now trying and stay behind Tony in the slipstream and in DRS range. And then in P8, in last place, Jos with his Force India. Of course, the only retirement today was SJW with the other Sauber. Unfortunately for him, nothing he could have done on lap 1 after turn 13. Jos lost the car and just hit him very hard, and it was a pretty nasty accident. And unfortunately for SJW, he wasn't able to continue the race, as was Jos, who in fact managed to continue, but he had to stop early on lap 1. So a 2-stop wasn't really the way to go today, as Tony as well has dropped to P6. Of course, you have to feel for Tony. I mean, he was in P3 before the pit stops, and as Lewis Hamilton did in 2007, I believe. In 2007, he lost his car coming into the pit lane, and luckily for Tony, there is no gravel trap nowadays. Otherwise, he would have retired from the race, as Lewis Hamilton did in 2007. A mistake that would eventually cost him the championship, as Kimi Raikkonen would go on and win not only China but Brazil as well, the final race of the season. And with Lewis Hamilton coming home in P7, I think, Kimi Raikkonen was able to win the Drivers' World Championship. He's only Drivers' World Championship, and just 1 point ahead of both Fernando Alonso and Lewis Hamilton in the McLarens. Of course, one of the closest championships ever. 3 drivers in only 1 point. And yeah, that just sums up how unpredictable and great Formula One is, because Raikkonen was coming into that round with a 7-point gap from Lewis Hamilton, if I'm not mistaken, because it was I remember that pretty well actually. As a child, I used to love, of course, Ferrari and Kimi Raikkonen, so I remember that pretty well. It was 108 points for Hamilton, 107 for Alonso, and 101 for Raikkonen. And Raikkonen managed to win the race. No, sorry. Raikkonen managed to win the race. Alonso had less points. He had like 104. Yeah, he had 104 because he was 3 points ahead of Kimi and finished 1 point behind, as he finished P3 in the race and Lewis finished P7. So that was how Kimi Raikkonen won the 2007 championship. And it was really thanks to his teammate Felipe Massa, who pretty much let him pass in Brazil. Otherwise, Raikkonen wouldn't have been champion. But, that's another story. And behind that, right now behind him, Doran, Meg went a little bit wide in the final corner. Of course, Meg in P2 trying desperately to catch Doran, but unable to do so. He's in P2, and KW Tactics goes into the pits. Maybe wasn't sure he was going till the end with mediums. Of course, he has a 24 gap. Well, 24 seconds gap to Tony, but Craig is now passed, and he's in P4 with 4 laps to go. Well, 5 laps to go for them. I don't think KW will be able to catch Craig, and he has to be careful, otherwise he will lose another place to Tony. Luckily, he doesn't. Yeah, strange decision from KW. I didn't think he was going to pit. I mean, with mediums, on lap 8 he pitted, I believe. On lap 8, 20 laps of mediums should be pretty doable. I don't know what was the issue there, but KW loses a place, and the Haas driver of Craig gains one, and is now up into P4. And if he finishes like that, it will be his best finish in this Invictus Formula 2 Equal Performance League, as his best result was P5 in the Brazilian Grand Prix. So yeah, a pretty good consistency from Craig. Finished in P5 in Brazil, and finished then P7 in both Italy and Great Britain. However, he did not finish in Mexico, the opening race of the season. So apart from that, a pretty consistent season for Craig so far. He now sits in P4, 11 seconds ahead of KW, and if he doesn't make any mistakes, I don't think he's going to lose that place, and he's going to finish in P4. Up ahead, nothing to do for Meg. He's all the way down. He's in P2. He's 2.2 seconds behind. You have to say that Doran and Meg are pretty much equal on pace. They've been from 1.5 to 2 seconds away from each other the whole race. And if you have a look at their pace, long run pace, yeah, look at that consistency. I mean, just a couple of laps over the 36s into the 37s for Doran, and just a couple of tenths slower Meg. Instead of high 36s, he's going for high 36s and low 37s. However, in the last few laps, Meg He's actually starting to gain something. Of course, 36.6 on Meg, whereas the last lap was a 36.7 from Endurance C. Very, as you can see, very close between Doran and Meg. Unfortunately, though, not close enough to have a battle on our hands as we start the third to last lap here in China. 2.5 seconds the gap between Doran and Meg. And behind, you have to say, Nick is doing a pretty good job because he's not losing that much of that much time. He's handling himself pretty well. The number 12 in the Silver Arrows, just one, of course, today and in the whole championship. Of course, now KW Tactics smashes the record in the lap record in the race with a low 1:35. However, he's 7.5 seconds behind Craig. Absolutely impossible for him to gain that much time in 3 laps. So yeah, pretty difficult decision for KW. Probably would have preferred to finish in P4. Would have been his second best result of the season. Of course, he finished P2 in Italy after 2 non-points finishes in Mexico and Brazil. And then last time out, he finished in P5, gaining 5 points in Great Britain. So he would match his second best result today. So that's a good race for him anyways. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, he started from P6. No, he started from P8, so even better for him. He gained a couple of places, gained 3 places to climb up to P5. Of course, he was P4, but you have to think that he wouldn't have finished the race on those medium tires. Starting the penultimate lap, now it seems that Meg has just given up on the fight for P1, just trying to bring the tires to the finish. Of course, quite a difficult task here as tire wear is pretty harsh with Doran in P1, just 4 seconds ahead. Of course, it was 2.5 seconds the last lap, so probably Mega's given up and he's just decided that he's going to settle down for P2, which is a good decision. I mean, to risk too much would have been a mistake by him. Of course, he's just 2 points behind Doran. If things stay like this, he's going to be in he's going to be 2 points more, 2 more points behind. As now behind, we have a battle for P7 for the penultimate and, well, for second to last and last place in this race with Jos, who has managed to gain those 6 seconds in 8 laps, as we said before, and has overtaken Hulkenberger into turn 1. So, not a total disaster for the Force India as well. At least he managed to overtake somebody today. He's in P7, and now, unfortunately for him, Hulkenberger is going to settle down for P8. Shame for him. He didn't ever look like a contender for a podium spot today, and not even a top 5 or top 6 finish. Unfortunately, he just didn't have the pace around here, so that's a shame. But yeah, this is racing. Of course, he was very competitive last time out in Great Britain, finishing P4. So just a bad one for him. He's still going to get 3 points out of today, so still a positive-ish race, as Renault would go to 50 points in the standings, and Sauber would go up to 46. So the gap would only be 4 points. And talking about Sauber, of course, and Doran right now starts the last lap of the Grand Prix. What a race it has been for him. I mean, what a couple of races these last few ones have been for him. This will be his 3rd race win on the bounce, 3rd of the 5 rounds that we have raced in at the moment. Of course, he finished P2 in Mexico at the start of the season and didn't finish in the points in Brazil. So it was a 2nd place, a no-points finish, and then 2 wins in Italy and Great Britain. And right now, coming towards the last few corners, turn 14 and 15, the hairpin once again managed brilliantly by the Sauber driver, who's going to come round the final corner, and Doran will win the Chinese Grand Prix, his third win in a row. He keeps the championship lead 2.7 seconds ahead of McLaughlin, who finishes P2. He should be happy with that. And Nick would be very happy with that third place. He's finally back on the podium after Brazil. And yeah, the Mercedes driver has done a great job today and finishes just 7 seconds behind the leader. Now coming towards the checkered flag is Craig with his best finish of the season in P4. Great race for him. However, he is 25 seconds behind the leader, so he didn't really have the pace to challenge for a podium finish. It was a shame for both KW and Tony. The first one had to pit with only 4 laps to go because of a tire problem, I think, and then also Tony crashed while going into the pits for his first stop while it was in P number 3. Then it's Jos in P7 with his Force India, and then rounding up the top 8 for today's race is Hulkenberger in his Renault. And there we have it, the podium celebrations. The Sauber driver right now pretty much used to the top spot. Third time in a row that he sits into that, and yeah, pretty much a straightforward win for M. Doran, who takes the victory here in China. What a race it has been for him, and what a championship this is turning out to be. Of course, right now he is 4 points ahead of Meg, who will be in P2 in the driver standings and finishes P2 today. Didn't really look like he had the pace to overtake M. Doran or at least catch him. Third place for Nick, LJ Thompson. A great race for him. Craig finishes in P4, just ahead of KW Tactics and his team and Craig's teammate Tony in P6. Then Jos in P7 and Hulkenberger in P number 8, whereas the only retirement of today is SJW in the other Sauber. Yeah, so that pretty much wraps up the race for today. Unfortunately today, no post-race interviews. And yeah, I would like to thank everybody who's watched the race. I would like to thank, of course, everybody who has raced today. And of course, especially everybody who has finished on the podium. And yeah, next week we're going to be in Singapore for the Singapore Grand Prix in Marina Bay. That is going to be a very hectic race under the lights. It's going to be very, very good. I hope you don't miss it. And from the Nines Party is everything today, and I will see you guys next week.